My Nerd World and Depeche Mode, the podcast. This week on the episode, the retro-futuristic sound of Memento Mori. We'll talk about the fifth member of Depeche Mode. A new song has been added to the set list as the band continues their world tour, listener feedback, and a fan spotlight.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
I am so appreciative of how gracefully Martin Gore and Dave Gahan have aged. I know, it may seem like a weird place to start this week's Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. I was reading an article. I don't follow anything related to Madonna. I like a lot of her earlier 80s work, but lost interest in the, past few, I guess, probably past 2 decades, right? But there was an article recently, and it was dovetailing off of her recent stint at a hospital. She came down with something really bad, and I guess was was close to the point of death at some point. But there was an article where Madonna was talking about how she has really been harsh on her body trying to keep up with her youth, which she is losing, right? Because she's about the same age as the guys in Depeche Mode. But she continues to have all of this work done, and she just doesn't look like herself anymore. And how somebody decides that they want to age, that's up to them, right? To each their own. If they want to try to go through techniques to make themselves look younger, who am I to go and judge an individual, right, who feels that way? That being said, I was just thinking about Martin Gore and Dave Gahan and just how well both of those men have really embraced their age. You read any of the reviews for the show, and they all mention just how Dave Gahan is still such an amazing performer, as is Martin Gore. So just a quick hat tip and a clap for our boys in Depeche Mode for embracing their age and still going out there and putting on a fantastic show every night. Is it the 44 songs that Taylor Swift is doing? No, but when Taylor Swift is 60, we'll see how many songs she ends up doing during live shows. All right. I've got some things to dive into this week. I want to continue and start off with a little bit of commentary of Memento Mori, an album that I just continue to absolutely enjoy. And I was listening to it the other day, and as I was, something came to mind that I hadn't really thought much about before, or at least not in a long time. I spoke about this a bit on last week's episode, but what is it about this particular album that really has made it so popular? And the thought that I had was the melding of their electronic sound with the more organic soundscapes. It creates this retro-futurism that I can only really go back and point to Songs of Faith and Devotion doing something similar. I remember when Songs of Faith and Devotion was released, and the first time that I heard I Feel You, and mentally preparing myself for something that was going to be more along the lines of Violator 2, just because that album was so successful and really was the culmination of everything the band had done up until that point. Now, in hindsight, Songs of Faith and Devotion is a natural progression from Violator, and I'm so glad that they went that way. I think the first clue that album was going to sound different was not just how Dave was looking with the longer hair and the goatee and the further ink on his body, but also in the cover art for the I Feel You single. It had a raw edge to it that wasn't there for Violator. Now, that being said, I think the Songs of Faith and Devotion also did this sort of retro-futurism, as I kind of called it. And this is probably labeled as something else, and I'm getting the definition all screwed up, but this is how I call it. Where it had that combination of the technological advances and the keyboards and what they use on all their albums, while also providing these more organic soundscapes. Now, Songs of Faith and Devotion kind of really lean into that, with further use of guitars even more so than before, and live drums. what they did with Memento Mori, which I firmly believe is all Marta Solongni, the inclusion of her use of tapes, especially when you listen to Memento Mori back-to-back with, say, Spirit. You can hear the James Ford aspect of the production work in Memento Mori, but Spirit clearly lacks that more organic sound, and it's sort of like a raw techno sound. That's the only way I can describe it. And again, I'm convinced that Marta Solongni is responsible for this. It's most notable, and speak to me, that midpoint soundscape break that continues in the wall of sound that highlights the end of that track and the album is exactly what I'm pointing to. If you listen close, it's layered throughout the whole album. But even on tracks that are more straightforward electronic tracks, like Ghosts Again, that leans into more pure electronics. The production still flows perfectly from song to song. You look at My Cosmos Is Mine, having a more of an organic, thematic sound to it, going into Wagging Tongue, which again is more of sort of a pure electronics tone. And then out of Ghosts Again, you go into Don't Say You Love Me. It's got this sound of live drums, but they're not quite there. The strings have been manipulated to the point where they no longer sound like strings, say on a song like Soul With Me. And Don't Say You Love Me is probably one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs ever. It's, I'm kind of classifying these in different spots because I really love Ghosts Again, and Ghosts Again is up there with my favorite singles. But in terms of album tracks, Don't Say You Love Me is just absolutely spectacular. I totally and completely adore that song. Financial Times put out an interview this week titled Meet the Fifth Member of Depeche Mode. And I kind of chuckled because when I saw the headline, I was like, all right, so are we talking about Aigner? Are we talking about Peter Gordino? And then I'm like, oh, no, of course, we're talking about Anton Corbin. I trimmed the article down to just share with you some of the more interesting aspects of this particular article. Anton Corbin, 68 years old, is the fifth member of Depeche Mode, says the Financial Times. The band's longtime creative director, he will be part of the maelstrom that will take over their lives over the coming year. Talking about the tour, obviously, and the creative aspect of everything surrounding Memento Mori. Corbin and Gore have come a long way in music, but both still remember their experiences with the camera and guitar. I was fascinated by music from the age of 11 because it suggested freedom and a liberal way of living that I hadn't experienced living in a religious family on an island, says Anton Corbin. He recalls borrowing his father's camera to take snaps of local bands, believing it would arm him with the confidence to get closer to the stage. Everybody in my family was a minister. That didn't appeal, so I thought of becoming a missionary so I could at least travel. But aged 12, I read in a newspaper that 2 missionaries had been eaten by cannibals in New Guinea, and that was the end of that dream. The 2 men then erupt in laughter. Corbin is constantly, I called him Corbin, that's funny. Corbin is constantly cracking jokes. Posting some of his photographs to a Dutch magazine led to new aspirations. That's when I knew what I was going to do, he says. By the time he met Gore and Depeche Mode in 1981, Corbin was the official photographer for the NME. It was another magazine, Disco 45, that helped encourage 13-year-old Gore to start writing music. Someone had taught me a few chords on the guitar, and I'd buy the magazine as it had all the words. I'd just sit in my room for hours on end learning to play them. It was a great education in songwriting, he recalls. I'd never heard that story before. Discovering his mother's album collection was also enlightening. She had the old rock and roll stuff, Elvis and Chuck Berry, some doo-wop stuff, which I would play endlessly. I suppose it's the same with Anton and photography. But when I look back, I've only really had one major passion in my life, music. That passion helped shape Depeche Mode, one of the forerunners of pop electronic music. I guess we were already ahead of our time musically, Gore says modestly. When asked about the timelessness of the band's songs, which Corbin notes are constantly refreshed. What was happening back then for me was the true meaning of alternative, especially in 83 to 90, before it got more commercialized. You could do whatever you wanted, said Gore. who, like Corbin, found music helped him overcome the propensity to shyness. I struggled with relationships, so it was easier for me to write things than do things, he says. Perhaps surprisingly, Corbin was not into Depeche Mode in the early days. I've made up for it since, he jokes. I told myself that I was into serious music and thought that Depeche Mode was too popular for me. Gore retorts, they were too popular for me at the time. Neither was Gore, who was always a willing participant in Corbin's videos. We hated doing it in the early days, but as it went on, we found the stuff got a little more serious. Corbin nods. It took time to develop. Dave was such a natural actor, which was great because all of the stories could be told through him, and Martin played a quieter role. Gore agrees. Yeah, David is a great frontman. He really works his craft on stage. He knows how to get the crowd going. You see it at the shows that we've been doing. By the end, they're a massive celebration. Corbin attributes much of the band's longevity to the transmutative mix of Gore's songwriting and Gahan's showmanship. But he does acknowledge his own part in that alchemy. When we started making more videos after '86, we realized that my visuals and the band worked well together. We had a kinship approach. I think I made a difference with my pictures because I shot them as a soulful band. Corbin's unique relationship with the band, he's been given carte blanche creatively, feeds into his photography, and he's become an unexpected chronicler for a clutch of different bands. It's interesting to see what Depeche Mode and U2, it's interesting to see what I have with Depeche Mode and U2, because I photographed people over an incredibly long time. That's really interesting because it's the same subject, but I do different things with it. What does Gore think of Corbin's photography? I like a lot of Anton's work, obviously. He smiles cheekily. Corbin laughs. Thanks. I mean, come on, John Lee Hooker. Gore nods slowly. Yep, John Lee Hooker, Tom Waits, Ian Curtis, John Lydon. There are a few other people the pair want to work with collaboratively. I got lucky with this record, Ghosts Again, because Richard Butler of the Psychedelic Furs reached out to me, and that worked out really well, says Gore. I asked if he had any lyrics, so he sent me some, and I put those to music and sent it back to him and built it from there. Corbin would love to work with Bob Dylan again. Yeah, he could knock on my door, he says. I'd like to think I could make better pictures of Bob Dylan. I photographed him before, but it was just 2 frames at 2 or 3 in the morning in a parking lot in Cleveland. But then Corbin would not have it any other way. That's how it goes. You get a few minutes in a hotel room, you have to make it work. I've become good at using impossible spaces to my advantage. He shrugs. It's good when you have to work with your back against the wall. Quick decisions are usually most creative. One of the things that I really loved about Anton Corbin working with Depeche Mode is that early on, it was not what I envisioned, and certainly not what we had seen in terms of the promotion around the band. Now, I kind of came into my fandom of Depeche Mode right before we got into the promotional stage of Music for the Masses, discovering the band through Shake the Disease and catching up with before the release of that album. And then immediately diving into everything Depeche Mode, and of course Anton Corbin began working steadily and then exclusively with the band in terms of their creative direction. It was challenging at the time. I was not an individual as a kid who was into any sort of art, doing that thing with my fingers, and Anton Corbin's pictures were kind of strange and bizarre considering this music that I loved so much, and it was challenging, but it also put me as a fan in a position to keep an open mind, because I think at the time, even unknowingly, I thought, well, if the band that I have discovered and love so dearly trusts this guy to do their art direction and the band likes it, then maybe I should open my mind a little bit and see what they see in it. And that's when I really discovered my appreciation for what Anton did and have just loved his work ever since then. You want everything around the band to be cool, but then at the end of the day, it is all kind of cool because it's all around the band, right? TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. Leave a comment up on YouTube as well. Let's get to your listener feedback this week. James Coulter writes, after being forced to listen to Depeche Mode since 1981, my older brother and cousins, I eventually found myself putting the needle on the vinyl again and again, and I can't believe 40-plus years of this band songs came together for me when I had an amazing night at Twickenham on Saturday and was fearful that it could be the last time I ever witnessed such a performance. The band and the fans gave me goosebumps over 2 hours. But a new family vacation booking has sprung up, and Orlando being the destination, I could not believe that the Amway Center is my last chance to see this amazing show now on the 10th of October, already planning my black outfit. Hope more fans get to be in awe of such an outstanding event. James from Scotland. Thank you so much, James. As I've mentioned, I cannot wait to see this show with Matt in November. Time is going by entirely too slow. The Silver Fox writes, hi, John. I was at the London Twickenham Stadium gig, and I was blown away. The gig was electrically magical, and the atmosphere was electric. Both band and us fans were up for it, ready to rock. This gig was up there with the Crystal Palace gig I went to on the devotional tour. As soon as Wagging Tongue kicked in, I got emotional and had a tear in my eye. Still trying to be butch, though, being a veteran of 25 years of the British Army. I think it was a mixture of feelings, seeing my favorite band, who I have followed since 1985, of the first gig in 5 years, the new album, which is up there with Playing the Angel, and of course, Fletch's passing. So Wagging Tongue hit me with a barrage of emotions. And us Essex boys are made of hard stuff, so we don't show our emotions. But yes, I had tears, but it was of happiness and the train home. I was talking with other DM fans, and they said the same thing. The gig was nuts. I'm still coming down from the gig, and it's Wednesday now. Look, I know that I'm going to have a similar experience for just an abundance of reasons when I see this show in November. Yeah, I absolutely cannot wait. And I imagine that I will be shedding a tear or two as well. That's your warning there, Matt. All right, friend of the show, Jason writes, in the video for Wagging Tongue Vinegar Hill session, I noticed a bass guitar in the corner. So which song is coming next? My Cosmos is Mine, My Favorite Stranger, or Never Let Me Go? I can't find the comment from Anna, but she basically said she was approached by the band to remix a track from the new album, and she opted for My Cosmos is Mine. As Camel Fat has remixed Ghosts Again, and Daniel Avery has remixed Wagging Tongue, I'm wondering if they approached multiple artists to remix a track from the album, and these remixes will be appearing as extra tracks on future remix packages for singles or a remix album of Memento Mori. That would be interesting. If so, I hope Nights Are Ebb do a remix of People Are Good. That is a fantastic idea. One of my favorite remixes, it was Bon Harris of Nights Are Ebb, but was the I Feel Loved remix that Bon Harris did, which I think was actually superior than the album version. Talking of remix albums, whatever happened to Simian Mobile Disco remix of Spirit, the band referred to in the interviews for Spirit? They said that SMD had done a remix of each song and they would be released at a later date. I'd love to hear that. For me, the sooner they sever ties with Sony Columbia, the better, as the whole release thing has been a disaster and overly expensive since they've been with the company. I hope they find their way back to mute. Jason. Thank you as always, Jason. Appreciate that. Adam Barker writes, I'm not keen on the track Wagging Tongue. Much better tracks on the album. I think it could have worked if the single was a funky remix, but it's not. Okay, thank you, Adam, for the thoughts. Withering Flower Child writes, Krista says, hello, I hope you are well. I am, thank you. I'm on vacation. I'm very happy at the moment. I just want to thank you for your Depeche Mode podcast. I've been listening to the latest Memento Mori information from you, and I love it. My faves are My Cosmos is Mine, Wagging Tongue, Ghosts Again, and Soul With Me. What a great atmosphere. Thanks again, and God bless you, Krista. And God bless you as well, Krista. And thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for the listener feedback this week. All right, before we wrap up, let's get to a fan spotlight. This one comes from Mark. Hey, John, I've been listening to your show for several years now. Every time anybody says that, it always throws me off. It's just weird. I forget that I've been doing this show for that long. It's probably because I had such a huge hiatus for a while. I was doing it consistently, and then I stopped doing it for, a year or so, if not more, which is a few episodes sprinkled in there, so I'm always taken aback by that. If people say they listen to my full-time radio show, that I get. I've been doing that for 27 years, for crying out loud. All right. Sorry, Mark. I've been listening to your show for several years now. I just wanted to drop you a line. I first heard Depeche Mode in 1984 with People Are People. But by the way, just real quick, I'm stepping all over Mark's fan spotlight this week, but I found a way back to People Are People, which is really weird. I liked the song when it came out, obviously, but it was never high on my list of Depeche Mode songs that I ever would like go and return to listen to. I couldn't tell you up until about a month ago the last time that I went and said, I want to listen to People Are People. It was way low on the list. However, I grabbed it because I wanted to hear it up against People Are Good. And I've got an idea. I'm going to do a remix. I may work on it this week since I've got the week off. But I've got a mashup idea for People Are People and People Are Good. But listening to that to that track, suddenly now I've just sort of rediscovered it. I mean, I know the song like the back of my hand, including all the remixes, but now I'm just really loving listening to it. And it's probably because People Are Good reminds me a lot of that, and I find them as just good companion tracks together. So anyway, all right, back to Mark. It was such a stark contrast to anything that was on the radio or MTV at the time. I was only 12. I lost track of them until 1986 when I heard A Question of Lust on the radio. Again, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. So different than anything else. I convinced my sister to drive me to our local record store. I found the cassette for Black Celebration. When I got home, I just fast-forwarded to track 3. I did this move about 4 or 5 times. Then I decided that I should listen to the whole album. Needless to say, I was taken aback by the sounds, the lyrics, the structure. I was hooked. I spent the next year playing catch-up with their back catalog. Didn't we? I mean, so many of us did exactly the same thing. That's so funny. We did. We just all went and tried to consume every little bit of Depeche Mode we possibly could. I still remember that year. Going to every record store, every import shop, because you didn't know. I didn't have like a master list of Depeche Mode things. I just went to try to find anything that I could. I was eagerly anticipating the music for the Masses in 1987. They played the Cow Palace in San Francisco in 87, but I didn't have a license yet, so I couldn't get there. I grew up near Sacramento, California. I couldn't find anyone to drive me. In 1988, they played in Sacramento. While I did have my license, I had no car. There was a girl in my art class that liked Depeche Mode. I asked her if she was going to the concert, and she was. However, she said she was going with her boyfriend, and I didn't feel like I should ask to tag along. Now, fast forward to 1990. A friend of mine worked at a local record store, and this store was a Bass Ticketmaster location. I was able to get 3 consecutive tickets for World Violation, 2 at Shoreline and 1 at the Cal Expo. Out of high school, I had a part-time job working for Bill Graham Presents. Wow! That's a name I have not heard in a long time that adorns many of my Depeche Mode tickets. I would work front of stage or aisle control for most concerts in Sacramento or the Bay Area. While I never got to meet the band, I was able to get in early at the Cal Expo in time to watch them do a sound check. I used my Bill Graham Presents credential laminate to get in and acted like I was moving some barricades around. For sound check, they did Halo and A Question of Lust. What's interesting was that they never did A Question of Lust on World Violation. Anyways, for every tour after that, I've seen them 2 or 3 times. All of the Bay Area shows and Sacramento shows. I recall you mentioning you saw them for the Exotic tour after the Devotional tour. Yeah, I was at the Sacramento Shoreline and Concord Pavilion shows. Probably World Violation was my absolute favorite experience, but I saw them on the Global Spirit Tour in Sacramento and was just blown away. Not going to sugarcoat it, but I got a little misty-eyed with everything accounts. Mark. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for being this week's fan spotlight. I was enjoying some spiced rum last night, and everybody had gone to bed, and I had my headphones plugged into my receiver system for where I watch, in the movie TV room. Way more details you needed to know, but be that as it may, I'm setting a scene. I had lights off and I'm on YouTube and I'm watching Depeche Mode videos. There's a great compilation of all of the short clips that have been released from the only official footage that we have from World Violation that DepecheMode.com had put out. The songs aren't complete. It lasts about a half hour, but if you're just looking to sort of soak in the vibe of that World Violation tour, which, we all would love to see released officially at some point in time, find that on YouTube and check it out. It's worth a watch. Again, the songs aren't complete, and you don't really get any wide shots of the stage itself with the visuals, but you do get just some great, albeit somewhat grainy as best as we can get, some great footage of the band's performance and the songs on that tour. It is just it's heartbreaking they haven't released anything from World Violation. And man, I wish that they would. They included on the second night, and you got to forgive me. Oh, it was Frankfurt. There we go. I remembered. The two Frankfurt shows. The second night, Martin replaced, and Peter Gordino, he replaced Soul With Me with Shake the Disease, which I thought was interesting. He did Home and Shake the Disease, and they dropped Soul With Me, which is kind of a bummer in my opinion. I'd keep that one, change up Home. And while I'm glad that they changed up the set list a bit again, I'd much prefer a fully produced To Shake the Disease with Dave Gahan singing vocals than I would to hear a Martin sort of acoustic portion of it, which raises the question of whether or not Martin and Peter are going to start playing with some more songs during the two-song set that Martin does midway through the show. So have to keep an eye on that. All right, that wraps up the show for this week. Before I let you go, if you are interested in picking up any of the books in my EMBARK science fiction series, specifically the paperbacks, you can buy them directly from me. I'll even autograph them for you if you want. Shipping is only $5 on them, and it's actually cheaper than what you can get on Amazon. Amazon raised their printing costs, which ended up costing all of us authors more money. So we had to raise prices on the paperbacks. However, I've got a box of all the books in my science fiction space opera series sitting here at home, so you can purchase the books directly from me if you were interested. All you got to do is drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I will give you the details on where to send your payment and how quickly. I can usually get those in the mail within a couple of days, so you can probably get them within about a week. Given the holiday this week in America, it may take a little bit longer. And if I'm shipping overseas, the shipping might be a little bit more. But certainly here in the States, I can ship the books via media for just $5. So, you love Depeche Mode, but if you like to read science fiction, I hope you will treat yourself, a friend or a family member, by purchasing one of the books in my 7-book series. Set in the future, where air and spaceflight culture has replaced car culture, it was inspired in part by Depeche Mode, life in the so-called space age, the world we live in, and life in general. Depeche Mode plays a large part in the underlying themes of the story. The main character himself is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time in the future when the music of my generation, between the 80s and 2000s, is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. Much in the same way, I was inspired quite a bit by Ready Player One and how the 80s were so popular in those books. I played on sort of a similar theme in my science fiction space opera series. Book one is a mashup of all the stories that I love, whether it's the romance of your 80s and 90s films, Say Anything, John Hughes, and then your science fiction, Star Wars, your disaster films, Earthquake, the more modern takes, 2012. It really is, the first book is really a mashup of the genres that I love, all within science fiction, as the rest of the series leads into more of a traditional epic space opera. The stories do feature references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. Keitha's father, book one's description is as follows. Keitha's father died 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. Taft Guardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship. after fellow pilot Keith Amaro received a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father. What he thought was a routine investigation quickly turns into a dangerous journey of discovery and survival when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events. As a corporate madman with an armada at his disposal attempts to gain control of the global evacuation, they discover what may be the only hope of stopping him. The clock is ticking as Taft Keitha and a ragtag squadron of pilots fight to save Earth's evacuees from annihilation and secure their future among the stars. If you like your science fiction to be epic with some romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. It is written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 and older. Available in hardcover, paperback, as I mentioned, audiobook, and ebook. So if you're interested in the paperback, you can purchase those directly from me. Just email talkshownerd@gmail.com. Or you can go to Amazon.com, search for EMBARK, Jon, Jon Justice, or mynerdworld.net. If you're looking for a way to support My Nerd World, this is how you do it. Buy yourself a book. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. I'll be back again next week. Until then, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. Talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from